Buon pomeriggio e porgo un cordiale saluto di benvenuto alle stimate autorità qui presenti, il signor ambasciatore di Israele presso la Santa Sede, Raphael Schutz, la rappresentante dell'Ambasciata della Gran Bretagna, il vescovo di Porto e Santa Rufina, Sua Eccellenza Monsignor Gianrico Ruzza, il segretario del Dicastero per il Servizio dello Sviluppo Umano Integrale, Suor Alessandra Smerilli, e un saluto cordiale alle autorità civili, religiose e accademiche, agli ospiti e ai membri della comunità accademica dell'Auxilium che sono qui presenti o collegati online. I cordially greet and express my sincere esteem to the speakers of this event, high-profile experts with experience and professionalism, whose reflection will guide us to build harmony around new perspectives of political and economic commitment in terms of social development and sustainability. The female thinking, in this sense, offers an indisputable contribution to making contemporary society ever more fully human. I am sure that at the end of this afternoon, we will have acquired new tools to think green and to do it together, men and women, all united by the concrete commitment to contribute, each one for their own part, to safeguard, defend, promote a human ecology to the service of building a civilization of love, peace and justice. As we get started, I wish everyone a great panel discussion.
Abbiamo adesso il saluto dell'ambasciatore.
Monsignor Russa, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'd like first to express my sentiment and gratitude to all of you for participating in our event titled Thinking Green Together, Women's Perspective on Climate Change and Sustainability. I thank the four panelists, the moderator, the attending audience, the Association Donne in Vaticano for their assistance, and last but not least, our hosts of the Pontifical Faculty Auxilium for their generosity and cooperation. I really appreciate it. Being the only man on stage here today reminds me of when I've presented my letter of credentials to His Holiness Pope Francis last November. Both of us were the only men in the room. With us were the 6 wonderful women that compose my embassy staff and my not less wonderful wife. The Pope was not blind to this lineup. His comment was, "You work in a blessed environment." I couldn't agree more. Thank you. In the embassy, we thought such an event would be a good way to acknowledge and emphasize women's immense role in society and humanity. We initially planned to have it around International Women's Day, March 8, but COVID-related and other circumstances made it impossible. In a way, there is a plus in how things turned out, since the role of women in combating the pressing universal challenges cannot and should not be confined only to one symbolic day. Almost 30 years have passed since diplomatic relations have been established between the Holy See and Israel. Past and history are very present in these relations, But in order to be relevant and constructive, we must look into the future. By now, it is all news that our challenges are global and know no border. First and foremost, how to protect our planet and cope with the fact that natural resources such as water, food, and others are not unlimited. Pope Francis' 2015 encyclical Laudato Si, as well as the Jewish term Tikkun Olam, repairing the world, address the need for universal solidarity and can indicate the way to act together to protect our common home. State-of-the-art technologies and the spirit of innovation Israel is proud of must give supporting tailwind to this journey. The importance of women's role in this endeavor cannot be overestimated. And now I leave the stage to the experts. Thank you very much.
Thank you. But maybe first you, Bishop, wanted to... No? That's okay. So we're going to start. Okay. So good evening, everybody, and welcome again to our meeting. My name is Nina Fabrizio. I'm a journalist of the news agency ANSA, generally covering the Vatican and the Pope's activity. And today I have the great pleasure to introduce our estimated speakers. As already mentioned, in the year 2015, Pope Francis, who is maybe here with us, published his green encyclical Laudato Si. That document is not only a profound hymn to the creation, but it also provides a message to the whole humanity, the message that we are all responsible in the care of nature. Such a point of view is largely shared by other great religions as Judaism, and also gives us a perspective of peace, since if the whole humanity is committed to the same purposes and with the same values, it will also tend to avoid conflicts that put at risk the purposes and those values. Pope Francis also tried to go further, launching the hypothesis of a new sin, the sin of ecocidio, meaning the killing of ecology. I quote, "We should think about an ecological sin, a sin against the common home," he said at the conclusion of the Synod on the Amazon. Made this premise, is now the time to ask ourselves, what is the specific contribution that women make in this field? And what new perspectives emerge from female thought? And we are therefore here to hear the words of 4 experts. So let me start with Sister Alessandra Smerilli. Darò qualche informazione in italiano, ci conosciamo. È segretaria del Dicastero per il servizio dello sviluppo umano integrale, è professore ordinario di economia politica qui alla Facoltà di Scienze dell'Educazione Auxilium e i suoi interessi di ricerca sono legati alle teorie economiche della cooperazione e delle organizzazioni a movente ideale. Professoressa Smerilli, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you to all the organizers and the participants to this conference, and I see that this seminar is a result of a great collaboration and cooperation among different entities, and I think this can make what we are doing this afternoon fruitful for everyone, and not only for women. And so I've been asked to say something about the female perspective of climate and sustainability. And so I'd like to start quoting Pope Francis. And Pope Francis, on the 1st of January 2020, he said, "The Bible tells us that woman come onto the scene at the height of creation, as a summation of the entire created world. For she holds within herself the very purpose of creation, the generation and safekeeping of life, communion with everything and with all things, care for everything and all things. This is why the Catholic Church starts each year by celebrating Our Lady. Born of woman, the rebirth of humanity began from a woman. Women are sources of life. But we all know that all around the world, far too often, women are not respected and valued for their essential contribution to society, and that their dignity is not honored. Let me start by highlighting the discrimination that far too many women are suffering still in our 21st century. From female infanticide, forced marriage, forced prostitution and trafficking, female genital mutilation in the worst cases, to persistent discrimination in the economic and social sectors. We see this, unfortunately, in many countries today. Even the judicial system is often unfair, with the burden of proof especially heavy when the plaintiff is a woman. But if we come to the climate crisis and environmental issues, we can say, we can see how women are disproportionately affected by climate change. Climate change is often described as a threat multiplier. In contexts where insecurity and civil unrest increase, in areas where there is no more any reliable administration, very likely women's dignity will be very much endangered. In remote rural areas, when poverty increases, men and young boys will often try to emigrate and seek a better future far away. But frequently, women remain, caring for the children, for elders, for the crops. They shoulder many duties, but receive less support and little, if any, protection. As the UN Women stated last February, women and girls experience the greatest impacts of climate change, which amplifies existing gender inequalities and poses unique threats to their livelihoods, health, and safety. In many countries, mothers and newborns are dying because of the lack of safe water, sanitation, and hygiene while giving birth. And this lack of water, sanitation, and hygiene, the acronym is WASH, and this lack of WASH facilities is keeping older girls who are menstruating out of school 4 days at a time. And here, we as educators, we can understand how dangerous is this. Even in some Catholic healthcare facilities in poor areas of some countries in Africa, pregnant women are asked to bring dozens of liters of water to facility before giving birth. Girls and women in need of toilet facilities must often travel far from villages or refugee camps, exposing them to rape and other forms of violence and abuse. And whenever the spring is far, carrying heavy buckets of water is generally considered a feminine task. We know that this has been going on for centuries. A long, long time ago, a woman in despair without water, was crying. She could not bear the vision of her boy dying of dehydration. Her name was Hagar. We still have too many Hagars today. More recently, we have learned about what can happen when our water is polluted. 10 years ago, 2 UN agencies warned about endocrine disruptors, which can affect the baby in the mother's womb. Chemical pollution is a threat to humanity, to motherhood, to femininity, to life, and the list goes on. But on the positive side, we can say something about the women's contribution to sustainability. And maybe this has been neglected or disregarded, but is something that is happening. We should all be aware that distinctive feminine point of view has not been duly considered, for example, in economic theory. Development, according to mainstream economic theory, is often planned considering the Homo economicus, that is a solitary, calculating, competing, and insatiable man. This is a caricatural model turned into a model for the whole society, explains the British economist Kate Raworth. A model clearly unable to take care of commons, unable to respect women's wisdom, to operate according to what some scholars have called irrationality, let alone consider its relevance for solidarity and collaboration. If we base the economic theory on the individual, we can't allow, we can't see the development and the integral human development as something that has to do with commons, our common home, and what we have in common. It's worthwhile noting that in 1911, in the first number, the first edition of the American Economic Review, a woman, Dean Catherine Coman, studied water management in the western part of the US, where water rights were a matter of serious concern. Yet, progressively, a desire emerged to encourage a more democratic form of irrigation by cooperating communities, because what might be accomplished by cooperative effort has already been demonstrated in Colorado. I'm quoting this article. Similarly, later, in 2009, the American economist Elinor Ostrom, the first ever woman to receive the prestigious Nobel Prize in Economics, challenged the conventional wisdom by demonstrating how local property can be successfully managed by local commons without any regulation by central authorities or privatization. It was long held among economists that natural resources that were collectively used by their users would be overexploited and destroyed in the long term. Elinor Ostrom showed that when natural resources are jointly used by their users in time, rules are established for how these are to be cared for. And then Professor Luigino Bruni, one of my co-authors and friends as well, observed that at the beginning and at the end, for now, of the theory of commons, there are two women. In fact, commons are relationships between people mediated by goods. Without attention to the relational dimension of life and economy, without a relationship, commons first cannot be seen, and then they cannot be understood, and finally they perish. When we look at relationships intrinsically, women have a vocation to take a leading role, and so to pass on life. Their look and their flesh connect generations and create brothers and sisters out of their members. Capitalist economy has to make a great effort to understand commons, because in general, it does not address problems in a historical or geographical perspective. And in fact, it does not see relations but separate individuals, and it is defined entirely within the registry of male rationality. It's worthwhile noting that few years before Ostrom, the Nobel Prize for Peace had been awarded to Wangari Maathai, the first American woman to receive the prize, precisely for her environmental activism and her work empowering rural women in Kenya. A woman is more open to relationality, we know, how people and things are connected. She is more open to care. She gives life. We understand so well the fact that time goes on and the procrastination is dangerous. Environmental problems and issues of social justice have to be fixed as soon as possible. And finally, I would like to conclude with some encouraging remarks and suggest some steps or some examples. Women indeed do have a special role, and a warning from Pope John Paul II is still meaningful. In a time characterized by materialism and secularism, Our Lady seems to emphasize a special mission of women, that is to be a witness of those essential values which are seen only with the eyes of the heart. To you, this is Pope John Paul II, women falls the task of being sentinels of the invisible. Responsibility, solidarity, common destination of good, generosity are certainly among those values. Even when a woman is powerless, she will often do whatever she can according to her responsibility and generosity. I have in mind the now famous Sister Rose kneeling and praying in Myanmar facing the anti-riot police. I have also in mind women protesting in Nigeria who in 2014 half-naked marched against an oil company denouncing the non-implementation of an agreement. And I'm receiving at the Dicastery many young women protesting against some oil and gas companies that are destroying some part, and they are, for example, Uganda. I have in mind these young women from Uganda, but also from Brazil, and they are fighting. They are there putting their face in order to ask that they can stop. So, in one way or another, women are very much dedicated to sustainability and peace. We now have a deeper understanding of climate injustice and poverty, and many women are leading climate actions movements, championing for clean sources of energy and building alternative community models that focus on sustainability and cooperation. And in addition to this, women are fast becoming pioneers within the green economy and are heavily involved in advocacy. In 2019, the European Journal of Political Economy conducted a study on whether female parliamentarians make a difference regarding the intersection of gender and climate change. And the study found that increasing women's representation in national parliaments led to the adoption of more stringent climate change policies, resulting in lower emissions. At a grassroots level, the participation of women in natural resource management is associated with better resource governance and conservation outcomes. And we have many examples, but I'd like to acknowledge now, especially the example given by many religious congregations in the way in which they are committed to development and to a more sustainable economy. And here I can't forget to quote, to say that our congregation, sorry for giving an example in my house, in the Dicastery, we launched this Laudato Si action platform, 7 years of actions with 7 objectives. Laudato Si, I didn't quote here the Laudato Si, but Laudato Si is the basis for everything. And I can say that the most active participants in that platform, among the 7 groups, there is one group made by religious. The most active group are our congregation, the Daughter of Mary, Help of Christians. And I think that saying this in our university that can do something for spreading the message and trying to find way in which we can be educated and trained for this very important issue. I think that it's worthwhile to say something here, to acknowledge that something important is happening, and this can be something to be remembered in the history, I mean. So I conclude, a feminine-inspired spirituality and an ecological spirituality can have a lot in common, but both flow from an essential appreciation and for understanding of relationship, interconnectedness and interdependence between and among species and ecosystems. Environmental degradation is a huge wound which manifests the Earth's cry for healing and respect. Women have long held a special place in societies as practitioners of healing, respect, and love. And St. Francis of Assisi called nature a mother. Praise be you, my Lord, through Sister Mother Earth, who sustains us and governs us, and who produces varied fruits with colored flowers and herb. He understood well that issue. What is important is to acknowledge that development from a woman's perspective is not merely green, it's multicolor. It will always be integral, interconnected, and sought in a spirit of cooperation and unity. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Smerilli, for giving us the framework, but also the examples. But now we want to go more in details with Dalit Wolf-Golan. She also has a proposal. So lei è la vice direttrice israeliana e direttrice dello sviluppo regionale dell'associazione EcoPeace Middle East. The floor is yours.
Thank you. First of all, I would like to thank His Excellency, the Ambassador, and his wonderful team for inviting me to present here another female perspective on climate change and sustainability, this time in the Middle East. The Middle East is the most water-scarce region of the world. While Israel has successfully solved its water supply problems through wastewater reuse and desalination, intermittent, limited water supply is the norm for most of our region. In Amman, capital of Jordan, water flows through the pipes just once a week. Ramallah and Bethlehem in Palestine have water once every 2 or 3 weeks. In Yatta, further to the south, they get water once every 3 months. And the situation in Gaza is even worse. As a result of over-extraction and pollution, 97% of their groundwater is no longer suitable for human consumption. The climate crisis is making a problematic situation even more desperate. The IPCC has identified our region as a climate hotspot, which means that the climate crisis is hitting us much harder and much sooner than the rest of the world. We already experience temperatures 2 degrees higher than they were a few decades ago. And by the end of this century, if we continue business as usual, we will see an increase of an additional 4 to 7% degrees Celsius, 40% less rain, and longer dry summer months with heat waves that will make it impossible to be outside. So we don't see much climate skepticism in the Middle East. On this, at least, our leaders can agree that climate change is real and climate change is threatening our very survival. Nevertheless, we are still seeing insufficient action, especially with regards to regional cooperation and integration. We are all sharing the same water sources, so isolated national climate adaptation measures are not going to be enough to deal with the implications of climate change. And we cannot leave any country behind, because as we've seen in Syria, instability emerging from water scarcity in any one of our countries will affect the entire region and possibly the world. Last October, in the days leading up to COP26, Pope Francis warned leaders not to waste opportunities that the current climate challenges present. He said, and I quote, that the most important lesson we can learn from this crisis is our need to build together, so that there will no longer be any borders, barriers, or political walls for us to hide behind. Working across borders, barriers, and political walls is what we do at EcoPeace. At EcoPeace is a unique organization. We're the only organization that exists in any field, consisting of Palestinians, Jordanians, and Israelis working together as one organization. We are about 60 staff working out of 3 offices in Ramallah, Amman, and Tel Aviv. At EcoPeace, we believe that we can create the understanding that we need to overcome our geopolitical challenges to meet the challenges that the climate crisis presents. We can create understanding that we need to build together, not only because failure to cooperate threatens our survival, but also because we have a roadmap that shows concrete opportunities that advance both self-interests and mutual gain. A roadmap that shows how climate change, instead of a threat multiplier, can be a multiplier of opportunities. The roadmap was published by EcoPeace in 2020, calling for a Green-Blue Deal for the Middle East, with the word blue emphasizing the importance of water in the climate crisis in our region. The Green-Blue Deal explains the necessity to take a regional approach, and it includes 4 proposals. The first proposal envisions a water energy exchange between our countries, in which Jordan will sell renewable energy to Israel and the West Bank in exchange for desalinated water to be sold by Israel to Jordan. This proposal received significant political support in the recent signing of the Declaration of Intent between Israel and Jordan to create such a water energy exchange, which will reduce carbon emissions, increase water supply, and enable each side to exchange something of value with the other, with enormous economic and geopolitical benefits for the entire region. The second proposal is all about the need to resolve water allocations between Israelis and Palestinians. This issue so core to the conflict and to the Palestinian water crisis, has been left unresolved as one of the 5 final status issues since the mid-1990s. Back then, we only had natural water, so solving water allocations was complicated. But that is no longer the case today. Because of Israel's ability to produce large quantities of water. So we're calling on both sides to stop holding water hostage to other final status peace process issues that are much harder to resolve, and to move forward to increase Palestinian water resilience and rebuild trust between the sides that there is a partner for peace. The third proposal is about the Jordan River. This river, holy to the 3 Abrahamic religions and to half of humanity, is today little more than a sewage canal. EcoPeace has developed a regional integrated master plan and is working with the World Bank, with our governments, and the private sector to implement region-wide climate-smart initiatives that will rehabilitate the river while meeting the water and economic needs of the populations along its banks. But it's the fourth proposal of the Green Blue Deal that I want to present to you today. It's not enough to inform decision makers about the water and climate crisis, and that it's in their interest to work in collaboration. It's just as important to generate effective social action on the grassroots level, especially among women and young people, to foster the kind of leadership currently missing. Some of you may remember the group photo of all 130 presidents and prime ministers who attended COP26. How fewer than 10 were women, and most leaders were aged over 60. We see the same gender and generation gap playing out in the Middle East. Half our population is female. Nearly a third of the population in the Middle East is under 30. But youth and women's needs and perspectives are rarely represented in the political process. We believe that young people, as the demographic that will be most affected by the impact of the climate crisis, should have access to information and resources needed to champion effectively for urgent action to be taken to secure a more sustainable future. Women here are particularly important because, as Professor Smerilli so elegantly explained, water problems disproportionately affect women. Yet, women are underrepresented in the water sector and in local municipal councils, and often shut out from the process of solving these problems. At EcoPeace, we believe that youth and women should have the opportunity to advance solutions to water security issues that affect their lives, their families, and their communities. So we encourage them to become knowledgeable about environmental challenges, develop innovative thinking about ways to resolve local and regional environmental problems, and how to effectively use tools such as diplomacy, citizen engagement, and technology. We do this, on the one hand, by mainstreaming climate education in public schools. We have developed a climate and water diplomacy curriculum that, through mostly female teachers that we train, reaches thousands of Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian youth each year and inspires many to take constructive action. Teachers, after receiving our training, have become strong advocates for addressing local water pollution issues in their communities. The youth, too, are continuing to develop projects like school climate days or cleanups that create a ripple effect in their communities. In parallel, we identify emerging young leaders, young Gretas, and train select groups of Israeli, Palestinian, and Jordanian youth and young professionals in Track 2 diplomacy, community activism, media skills, and green social entrepreneurship, creating regional peer networks that work collaboratively on transboundary challenges and setting them on career paths to continue advancing these issues. In doing so, we are trying to make sure that we remove barriers that would prevent women and girls from joining and benefiting from these programs. That means scheduling meetings at times that mothers will have help with childcare, including gender-sensitive perspectives, and ensuring events feature women speakers and expert role models. By taking these steps, by engaging decision makers and citizens most affected by the climate crisis, in creating solutions for the challenges that we face, we believe that, as Pope Francis declared, there is still hope. There is indeed a real chance for change, for a renewed sense of shared responsibility in which each one of us plays a part in changing our collective response to the unprecedented threat of climate change, even in a region as challenging as the Middle East.
Thank you, Dalit. Your experience shows us that we don't only have problems, but also solutions. Thank you. Okay, now we're going to listen Fausta. Fausta Speranza, she's a journalist, but she's also an author. Ha pubblicato da poco Il senso della sete, l'acqua tra geopolitica, diritti, arte e spiritualità, quindi rimaniamo sul tema dell'acqua, della risorsa idrica, proprio con una relazione dal titolo Acqua e diritto alla salute, pensare forme di governance di beni essenziali di fronte a emergenze interconnesse come guerre, clima, migrazioni, povertà. A te la parola.
Grazie. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for organizing. Thank you, authorities, for your attention. I would prefer to speak in Italian. If you don't, sorry, you are not sorry. Allora, la prima cosa ringrazio Nina per aver citato il titolo di questo libro. Io ho pensato questo libro dal momento in cui ho letto l'enciclica di Papa Francesco Laudato Si. Ci ho messo molto per scriverlo e poi per pubblicarlo, perché è stata un viaggio affascinante attraverso, diciamo, l'acqua. E che cosa mi ha colpito moltissimo dell'enciclica di Papa Francesco, tra i 1000 spunti che si possono trovare? Personalmente quello che mi ha segnato di più è stato il suo discorso sul tutto è in relazione, vedere tutto in relazione, quindi le persone con le altre persone, le persone con l'ambiente, e quindi ho pensato che davvero è il momento di superare la logica dell'ambientalismo, ringraziando gli ambientalisti per quello che hanno fatto, ma oggi come oggi va fatto un discorso mettendo tutto in relazione. Che significa? L'economista, l'internazionalista, il costituzionalista, l'ambientalista, perché no? E anche, lasciatemelo dire, il teologo o la teologa. Perché? Perché ci serve anche un bacino di spiritualità per recuperare uno slancio etico su questi temi. Ne va veramente la sopravvivenza dell'umanità, e quindi penso che abbiamo veramente bisogno di un bagaglio dal quale attingere, da una fonte dalla quale attingere. Allora, questo discorso della relazione, che è stata un po' l'impostazione del mio libro, mi dà l'occasione subito per esprimermi, come dire, in media re su quello che è il tema di oggi, no? Ecco, la prospettiva femminile. Io mi sono interrogata in particolare oggi per questo incontro, e credo di voler condividere questa idea. Io non ho una prospettiva femminile, diciamo, da promuovere nel senso soltanto di una maggiore presenza di donne. ho sentito osservazioni molto interessanti. Forse sicuramente non è un caso che l'esperienza così straordinaria di Dalit venga da una donna e sono d'accordissimo, è molto bello, come dice Sora Alessandra, che la donna riesce ad essere multicolore e non solo green. È vero, credo però che dobbiamo fare una riflessione. Finora la storia è stata una storia segnata da equilibri di potenza, contrapposizioni di potenza e dal potere. E fino adesso sostanzialmente, non credo mi possiate smentire, il potere è stato maschile. Allora quando io penso a una prospettiva femminile non penso tanto a una maggiore presenza delle donne, sì, perché no, certo, ma penso soprattutto a una maggiore presenza del femminile, inteso proprio nella mia idea come alternativa a quel potere che abbiamo conosciuto fino ad oggi. Un sovvertimento delle logiche. Faccio un esempio concreto, piuttosto purtroppo e drammatico. Avevamo pensato di aver sovvertito la logica delle guerre, almeno in alcune aree del mondo, ed è colpevole poi dimenticare che altrove invece le guerre ci sono sempre state, però almeno in alcune zone del mondo avevamo pensato con questi equilibri di potenza di aver costruito la pace. La guerra in Ucraina ci ha dimostrato che quell'equilibrio era facile, che l'ordine mondiale che avevamo pensato di aver stabilito, veramente c'erano tutti i segni per capire che era ben fragile, perché prima la fine della guerra fredda, poi la globalizzazione, poi la pandemia, c'erano stati parecchi scossoni e poi il mondo cambia e quindi è normale che un ordine non possa rimanere tale e sopravvivere. Abbiamo visto tutta la fragilità di quell'ordine mondiale quando è arrivata la guerra in Ucraina, che è stato quanto di più, a parte ovviamente dal punto di vista umanitario drammatico e tragico e triste, ma è stato anche qualcosa di estremamente vecchio, lasciatemelo dire. È stato un balzo nel passato, è stato tornare indietro e vedere di nuovo che l'unica parola è quella che si dà alle armi. O perlomeno speriamo che non sia così nel prossimo futuro, purtroppo è stato così nell'evidenza. Allora, in questo mio ideale femminile c'è il sovvertimento di questa logica. Arrivare a proporre invece in un ordine mondiale con logiche diverse una maggiore attenzione ai diritti. Faccio solo un esempio, sempre in relazione all'acqua. Nel nostro immaginario abbiamo sempre detto facile come bere un bicchiere d'acqua. Adesso sappiamo che nel 2030 il 47% della popolazione mondiale, che ovviamente è concentrata in 17 paesi, ma è la popolazione mondiale, avrà serissimi problemi di carenza di acqua. Sappiamo che se nel Novecento avevamo attinto a 600 chilometri cubi di risorse idriche dalle falde acquifere sotterranee, nel solo 2017 ne abbiamo attinto a 3.880. Quindi c'è un discorso dell'acqua serio da fare e il diritto all'acqua potabile è uno tra i più giovani dei diritti. A 12 anni, è stato introdotto 12 anni fa nella Carta Mondiale dei diritti internazionali, quindi non è più facile bere un bicchiere d'acqua ed è un diritto oggi già da difendere in tante zone del mondo. Se poi ci adagiamo a pensare che la siccità è un problema di alcune aree del mondo mentre in altre stiamo tranquilli, dobbiamo ricordarci che invece, primo, l'altra faccia della siccità per questi climate change, per questi rivolgimenti, l'altra faccia sono le alluvioni e l'abbiamo visto anche l'estate scorsa in Germania o in altri paesi dove non erano certo abituati a fenomeni di questo genere. Quindi le alluvioni e la siccità sono due facce della stessa medaglia. In più, anche nella nostra, fatemi dire, tra virgolette, comoda Europa, ben il 12% della popolazione dei paesi dell'Unione Europea lamenta con dati alla mano, problematiche legate all'acqua. Magari non è la siccità, magari non sono le alluvioni, però è l'inquinamento per tutte le industrie e per e anche in alcuni casi, in Europa meno, altrove di più, anche un'agricoltura diciamo fatta con metodologie vecchie che consumano moltissima acqua. La Cina e gli Stati Uniti, in questo sono estremamente accomunati, lamentano entrambi che la maggiore fonte di inquinamento per fiumi e altri fiumi, laghi dei rispettivi paesi viene dall'agricoltura, che è un controsenso. Ecco, allora sovvertire tutte queste logiche, vedere tutto in relazione e capire come la siccità di alcuni paesi provoca le migrazioni, ma comunque il discorso dell'inquinamento dell'acqua ci tocca anche da vicino. Mettere tutto questo in relazione sarebbe estremamente importante, sarebbe, fatemi dire, estremamente femminile. Un'altra prospettiva, se io penso a che cos'è una prospettiva femminile, penso quello dell'attenzione alle prossime generazioni. Un po' in questi anni ci ha provato l'Unione Europea ad avere politiche a lungo raggio, perché non ce la fanno gli stati e le nazioni, perché ci sono le elezioni e quindi la politica poi, diciamocelo molto semplicemente, c'ha il corto raggio, a breve termine, perché poi ci sono le elezioni e ci vuole il consenso popolare. Ecco, avere una prospettiva invece a lungo termine per le prossime generazioni sarebbe molto femminile, perché alternativa a quella che conosciamo oggi. Anche, lo accennavo prima, attingere al bagaglio di spiritualità, fatemi dire di sacro, che tutte le popolazioni del mondo e le religioni hanno creato intorno all'acqua, tanto per rimanere all'acqua, è l'elemento più essenziale, la risorsa più essenziale, è anche la più emblematica della vita, no? E quindi sappiamo che nelle religioni, nella religione cristiana, ma anche nell'ebraismo, io nel mio libro ho dedicato un capitolo all'ebraismo, all'Islam anche, e al cristianesimo, alla Bibbia e anche a tante filosofie orientali, o non so, voglio citare la mitologia armena, che ha una dea, Nahadi, forse meno conosciuta di altre cose, che è la dea della saggezza e delle acque. Quindi è bellissimo che abbiano messo in relazione. Perché dico questo? Perché sono profondamente convinta che anche recuperare questo bagaglio di sapere, di immaginario, di spiritualità intorno a una risorsa come l'acqua può essere assolutamente fondamentale per quello slancio etico che dicevo, e questo è estremamente controcorrente. Però perché è controcorrente? Perché il sacro non è assenza di pensiero, non è. Nel sacro c'è tanta saggezza, si ritrova tanta saggezza, no? E non è esattamente quello che va di moda in questo momento. Fatemi almeno parlare del mio ambito, che è quello della comunicazione. C'è una comunicazione molto spot, c'è una comunicazione, va di moda adesso lo storytelling, che va bene, va benissimo, però non può essere solo questo. Va di moda lo slogan, e l'approfondimento va molto meno di moda. Ecco, attingere alle fonti di un bagaglio di spiritualità, sia laica sia religiosa, fa parte proprio di questa modalità di attingere a quanto di più, diciamo, di più umano e di più importante per la società umana ci può essere. Anche questo può essere femminile. Sulla comunicazione faccio soltanto un altro esempio. È scoppiata la pandemia e abbiamo tutti detto: chi se lo poteva immaginare? C'era un documento dell'ONU, delle Nazioni Unite, nei media vaticani abbiamo fatto un articolo e abbiamo titolato "I caschi blu della salute". Perché? Perché c'era questo documento dell'ONU che parlava della pandemia, parlava delle misure che si sarebbero dovute prendere, perché la pandemia era un evento atteso. Si trattava soltanto di capire quando e come, era un evento atteso. Ecco, ignorare la documentazione, ignorare di studiare quello che gli esperti offrono, anche questo è qualcosa sul quale dovremmo andare veramente in alternativa. Poi è scoppiata la guerra in Ucraina e abbiamo letto anche sui giornali per parecchi giorni, i primi giorni, chi se lo poteva aspettare la guerra in Ucraina, dimenticando gli 8 anni di guerra nelle regioni dell'est e i 14.000 morti in 8 anni di guerra. Dimenticando anche qui fatemi fare un esempio concreto, che il Consiglio di sicurezza del maggio 2021, il Consiglio di sicurezza dell'ONU, anche lì aveva un documento in cui è possibile leggere esattamente che cosa? Che se la situazione continuava così si sarebbe arrivati a uno scontro maggiore. Ecco, anche tagliare le radici delle cose, tagliare gli approfondimenti, tagliare le fonti, per capire meglio, per mettere tutto in relazione, così come dice Papa Francesco, quello che ci accade intorno, anche questo è molto vecchio ed è molto legato a una logica di potere. Allora, se prendo appunto a spunto, non tutti gli uomini sono uomini di potere, per carità di Dio, però il mondo fino adesso è stato sicuramente in mano agli uomini, quindi tutto ciò lo possiamo definire maschile. Ecco, per me il femminile dovrebbe essere l'alternativa a queste logiche di potere. Grazie.
Diciamo, Fausta, che è molto facile cogliere appunto la tua suggestione di un rovesciamento nella logica di potere con gli eventi a cui purtroppo assistiamo, perché in effetti vediamo come le operazioni militari sono quasi tutte comandate da chi appunto ha vecchi schemi nella mente, però forse possiamo rovesciare gli schemi andando invece proprio alle origini. E quindi vogliamo ascoltare Linda Pocher. Lei insegna teologia fondamentale, mariologia e cristologia qui anche alla Facoltà di Scienze dell'Educazione Auxilium, e ci parlerà delle donne generatrici di un mondo nuovo, il ruolo delle donne nel libro dell'Esodo. A te la parola.
Good afternoon to you all. I'm so happy to be here with you and to share some reflection about the relationship between ecology and women. And I'd like to speak about the presence and role of women in the book of Exodus, because I think that it could offer a solid background for the enterprise that we are all called to embrace together, men and women, namely, to take care of the world that God had entrusted to us. The tale of Exodus, together with other ancient tales like Aeneid and Odyssey, have built the collective imagination, indeed the identity, of Mediterranean people. Many things could be said about these tales that many years ago were told from father to son, from mother to daughter, until they were written and became masterpieces of literature and poetry for generations and generations. Today, I would like to focus our attention on only one detail, a detail that could seem insignificant, but actually is decisive for the world development of Israel's exodus from Egypt, namely the presence and role of a network of women that, at the very beginning of the story, made possible that the adventure of the liberation from slavery of Egypt took place. I said that it's not about one special woman, but a network of women. Let's see who they are. First of all, just at the beginning of the book, we meet Sifra and Pua, two midwives. They work for the Hebrews, assisting Hebrew women in the process of giving birth. But from their names, we know that they are not Hebrew themselves. Indeed, the names Sifra and Pua sound more like Egyptian names than Hebrew names. Then we have another couple of women, the mother and the sister of Moses, Jochebed and Miriam, who are descendants of Levi. Last but not least, Pharaoh's daughter and her maid, who are not only Egyptians, but part of royal house. And so they live in the earth of Egyptian power, that power that is responsible for the Hebrew slavery and the cause of their suffering. So, we have three couples of women who probably do not know each other, who certainly are very different because of social background and culture. They worship different gods and they live very different lives. Why do we say that they constitute a network? What's the knot that allows them to act together? To answer that crucial question, we have to give a look to the villain of the story, the great antagonist of the Hebrew people, that is the king of Egypt. He is never called by name by the scripture. He is always called Pharaoh, without the article. That means that we are in front of a symbolic character, as to say, it's not important who Pharaoh is, but what he represents. And Pharaoh represents the embodiment of a certain style of wielding power. Pharaoh is the embodiment of the power that leads people to death. Is the antithesis of the power of care, which is represented by the women's network as they challenge Pharaoh all along the development of the story. So, we can say that the knot that keeps these very different women together is the effort to contrast the power of that of Pharaoh. Every one of them is carrying out, with their acts, words, and silences, a sort of conscientious objection ante litteram. Pharaoh, indeed, represents the perversion of authority. As a king, Pharaoh should have taken care of his people, but he did not. In his mind, people are only in function of the richness, power, and glory of the kingdom. His eyes could not see human beings as persons that must be respected and that have the right to take care of themselves and of their sons and daughters. That perversion of authority does not damage only the Hebrew, but also Egyptians, as we will see soon. The action narrated in the book of Exodus started when Pharaoh decided that every Hebrew child that comes to life must be killed immediately if it is a boy. Pharaoh condemns only boys to death because he does not know the power of care. He values people in a functionalistic way. He thinks that girls are weaker. Girls cannot fight against him. Of course, he is wrong, because a network of women is going to destroy his power of death, but he does not know it yet. Let us observe more closely how this network of women works and how they act together to generate the new world that is made of a family of free people on the march to the promised land. The first couple of women is characterized by their profession. They are midwives. That is to say, they possess a very specific knowledge that is fundamental for the life of people, most of all in that time when pregnancies were so frequent and the risk of death because of complications during the birth process were so high for mothers and children. Of course, that's not our situation, but we can always be inspired by the symbolic meaning of the midwife figure. The book of Exodus also made it. While the people of Israel is marching through the Red Sea, God himself acts like a great midwife. God delivers his children, taking them out of Egypt, that during the time of famine had been like a maternal womb, where the sons and daughters of Israel could find food and protection. The persecution of Pharaoh lets Israel know that it's time to live, to begin a new life. The figure of midwife shows us the truth that every new beginning needs someone that takes care of that something new that is coming to life, even if it is a child, if it is a project, or a new style of life. Well, how do the midwives stand against the decision of Pharaoh to put Hebrew sons to death? They use their knowledge against him. At that time, males were banned from the birth scene. That is to say, Pharaoh had never seen a birth before, and he would have never seen one after. That's why we cannot really tell if the Hebrew women were in fact so strong that they gave birth before the midwives reached them, or if they were simply fooling Pharaoh. Anyway, Pharaoh must have been silent because he does not know how a child comes to life. The power of life, therefore, is stronger than the power of death. The power of care is stronger than violence and abuse. Let's go now to the second couple of women, Jochebed and Miriam, the mother and the sister of Moses. Was their strategy to promote life against Pharaoh's power of death? First of all, they believe that life is possible for the child. They do not give up in front of the threat of Pharaoh, but they keep the secret about the new life that is germinating among them. They keep the secret and take care of the baby, but only as long as it is strictly necessary. They have prudence, courage, and discernment that let them understand that at a certain point they have to let the baby go if they want him to live. They have to entrust their baby to other hands and hearts despite the suffering of separation. The life of the child, his right to a future, is more important than the mother's claim to own and grow the child. Live and Become is the title of a very beautiful film of Radu Mihailanu that tells us the story of a Christian child born in Ethiopia during a terrible famine. This story took place in the 20th century, and the child could survive only because of the courage of the mother that entrusted him to another woman, a Jewish mother, who could take him to safety in Israel. The film witnesses the strength of women networks working against poverty, injustice, and death. Unfortunately, we have recently seen scenes like this with our own eyes. It was on a screen, but it was not a fiction. I cannot forget it, and I think you cannot either. Namely, Syrian mothers giving away their children in a desperate act of hope, in an obstinate act of faith in the beauty of life and in the good earth of others. We are all responsible for those children. We are all responsible for every single child that comes to life every day, everywhere in the world. Last but not least, I said, Exodus presents us the daughter of Pharaoh with her maid. Even if they are so close with Pharaoh, they choose to serve life, not death. When they see the child in the river and his sister behind him, they understand immediately that he is Hebrew, and they know that he is in certain danger of death. Taking him under her protection, the daughter of Pharaoh witnesses one more time that the power of care is stronger than abuse. Taking care of the newborn child, she opened the door of history to a new future. She prepared the generation of a new world. It takes a lot of time and patience to let grow something really new. God Himself waited a long time from the birth of Moses to the birth of Israel through the Red Sea. But the power of care will always bring some fruits. Nonetheless, the power of death eventually destroys also the one who handles it. Indeed, Pharaoh, in the attempt to catch Israel, causes the death of all his army, because the Red Sea closes its waters over them. And I think that is a good metaphor of what we are living, going through climate change and ecological crisis. If we all do not convert in our relationship with all creatures from abuse to care, we will be destroyed by the flow of our irresponsibility. To sum up, I believe it is important to say that, of course, Pharaoh can live inside every one of us, both men and women. Both men and women have to pay attention and remember every day that they are called together by God to take care of the entire creation. We can all learn from the courageous women that the book of Exodus presents to us as models of care. Today, we are here together, men and women, from different countries, cultures, and faiths, and we are tying a knot in a network that could support the generation of the new world, where peace, respect, and sustainability will be key words for the wellness of all creatures. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. So before concluding, if anyone has questions, don't be shy. I just summarize with some keywords: discrimination, water, responsibility, sustainability, life. So we are open if there are any questions or observations, or in the end we're gonna have some music. Sì, sì. Prego, non so come. Prego. Come vuoi.
Che non possono tradurre se non parla al microfono.
Non so. Vediamo. Sì, c'è un microfono. Prego. Sì, sì.
Penso che sia urgente e anche necessario cominciare veramente da Grazie mille. Penso sia urgente, per quanto riguarda il cambiamento climatico e lo sradicamento forzato, cominciare con urgenza a riflettere sulla conseguenza. Riflettere con urgenza vuol dire anticipare, che secondo me è un'altra risorsa della postura femminile che deve essere messa in campo, quella dell'anticipazione e dell'attenzione per prevenire. Ecco, questi sono elementi che hanno portato anche alla distrazione nella storia. Ora dico che gli ecorifugiati saranno la preoccupazione di cura maggiore nel tempo a venire. In realtà è già cominciato nel 2008 con 21 milioni di persone già sradicate. Il problema qual è? Non c'è una legislazione, non c'è uno spazio dove definirlo, e penso che questo sia necessario. C'è solo un paese in Europa che sta portando avanti questa riflessione e vale la pena creare dialogo, è la Svezia. Quindi è una sollecitazione forse di cominciare questa riflessione e dare il nome e una legislazione per la protezione degli ecorifugiati.
Posso, Nina?
Grazie.
Certo.
Credo che sia assolutamente importantissimo. Se posso vorrei tornare, perché credo sia veramente illuminante. Non mi sono soffermata io sul concetto di tutto in relazione di Papa Francesco, no? Perché l'enciclica poi l'abbiamo letta tutti, ma è fondamentale. Nel tutto in relazione di Papa Francesco c'è anche l'avvertimento importantissimo di considerare che le questioni climatiche, le migrazioni, le guerre sono tutte questioni estremamente interconnesse. E quando Papa Francesco ci ha parlato di terza guerra mondiale a pezzi, è interessante vedere come in questi giorni, con lo scoppio dell'invasione in Ucraina, sia stato citato in maniera esponenziale, molto più di tante altre volte in cui Papa Francesco ha usato questa espressione. È stato come un svegliarsi e capire questa espressione di Papa Francesco. La terza guerra mondiale a pezzi non era soltanto l'avvertimento sulle cosiddette proxy war, che pure è illuminante, cioè considerare che le guerre non sono solo quelle che scoppiano a un confine all'altro, ma sono anche quelle per procura su altri territori, e questo ci porta chiaramente a capire che in quel tutto in relazione ci sta anche lo strapotere di multinazionali che hanno un guadagni che sono più elevati del prodotto interno lordo di alcuni paesi. Anche questo è vedere tutto in relazione. La terza guerra mondiale a pezzi, secondo me, di Papa Francesco la stiamo purtroppo tristemente capendo adesso, lo vediamo appunto se viene citata così spesso, ed è anche questo, è capire non solo quanto possa essere grave, perché la famiglia umana è una guerra da una parte o dall'altra, ma anche la sollecitazione a rendersi conto che non possiamo chiudere gli occhi, non possiamo pensare che quella guerra è lì e basta. E quindi credo che il discorso i dati, le proiezioni sono di 250 milioni di persone soltanto dall'Africa subsahariana per l'aggravarsi del discorso della siccità e altro, ma sono anche le migrazioni tra Stati Uniti e Messico, sono anche le migrazioni all'interno dei paesi dell'Africa, perché non ci sono soltanto quelli che prendono la via del mare. Insomma, ecco, tutti questi discorsi volevo sottolineare ancora una volta di più. Se uno si mette nell'ottica della Laudato Si', ripeto, gli spunti sono tanti, ma questo concetto del vedere tutto in relazione è veramente fondamentale per capire quello che ci succede e anche per inventare un'alternativa, perché diciamocelo, anche questo può essere molto femminile rispetto al passato. Noi siamo abituati come umanità, come società, anche forse l'Occidente in particolare, questo non lo so, ma siamo abituati a vedere il mondo con le lenti degli schemi che abbiamo imparato. Lo vediamo anche adesso, per esempio, con il digitale, che si è sconvolto il mondo, ha sconvolto, no, tutte le logiche del mondo. Noi ancora diamo lo stesso nome per cose che sono talmente diverse rispetto, non so, mi viene in mente la fotografia. La fotografia era, fino all'avvento del digitale, l'immagine del reale. per definizione era quello che restituiva la cosa più vicina e restituiva al reale, no? E adesso la fotografia col digitale non è più tale. E mi viene in mente che dovremmo trovare un nome nuovo, perché non c'è niente di più manipolabile e con il digitale è facilissimo, no? Regalare una fotografia che non è proprio per nulla in adesione con il reale. In questo senso, e chiudo, scusate se sono stata lunga, credo che ci voglia anche, per quello che ci succede, un'impostazione mentale nuova, anche addirittura nomi nuovi, e lo stiamo vedendo anche per la pace, di inventare qualcosa. E chiudo pensando che il bagaglio di profondità dell'uomo, dei classici, dell'umanesimo che ci portiamo appresso. Mi viene in mente che una fotografia può non essere più reale, ma può ancora essere autentica. Autentico viene dal greco autentikos, no? Viene da autentes. Autentes vuol dire autore, e chi ha autorità su se stesso. Ecco, allora una prospettiva femminile mi piacerebbe che fosse anche quella di recuperare come esseri umani e non delegare, ma l'autorità e essere autori di come stiamo al mondo e della società, di questa famiglia umana di cui facciamo parte.
Sì, purtroppo Fausta ci ricordi un altro livello di questa guerra, che è quello della cyberguerra, e la guerra dell'informazione, e l'intervento invece ci ricorda anche, abbiamo possibilmente un'altra sfida davanti, quella di rifugiati di serie A, rifugiati di serie B, perché non dimentichiamoci anche i rifugiati del clima. E ci sono altre suggestioni?
Sì,
l'ambasciatrice Australia.
Vuole venire qui?
Prego. Sì,
Venire?
sentite. Non ho capito, con queste luci non vedo.
Prima forse c'è un'altra.
I'm grateful for this big assembly, for the seminar that you have conducted. Very, very grateful. And so much enthused and so much stirred by what you all said. I am from India, one of the daughters of Mary Help of Christians belonging to this community. Hearing to what you have said, quoting from the Bible, quoting from all the possibilities that you have made us aware, I'm sure all those who are here are really moved. We are being made aware of the necessity to work more in collaboration with everyone. Now what I would like to come to this point, as I was hearing, as I being moved, I want to ask this. After so much of hearing, being so much stirred up, at the end, what am I going to do next? I'll not be here for long, and I'm sure all the students are also moved, and they also will not be here for long. They will also go back to their own continents or countries. Now what we can do, what I can do when I go back, the countries that we have come from, sometimes we don't meet what we aspire. It's difficult to work with the government, difficult to work in the cities or wherever we will be. So, is there any possibility from the faculty here or from around here, those who have spoken, those who have made us aware, when we go back, if there is any possibility of implementing what we have heard, maybe in the form of tapping water sources, or maybe tapping in the form of irrigation, crops, growing crops, or in the form of that help promote life in the places from where we come. So, in this way, if there is any possibility that we could help from here through the resources, and then when we go back, maybe do something for the people. From my point of view, where I have come from, the sisters are working very, very hard. Sisters of different congregations, fathers are working very, very hard to promote life, to help in many, many ways, not only through education. But then the problem is this: some of the regions are good, some of the regions are not good in the sense of the soil. Some don't get water, it's very far, it's difficult. Some other region, they get water easily, or the government comes to their aid, while other regions, people are left to defend themselves, to fend themselves. So, if you could pinpoint certain areas, it can be any other countries which are underdeveloped countries or developing countries, to take one project and help those who are able to do that. So is there any possibility for this? Thank you.
To take action, right. Ok. C'era qualcun altro?
Thank you. I'm Chiara, I'm the Australian Ambassador to the Holy See, and thank you very much for this event, and I have to say to my colleague, the Ambassador to Israel, for hosting this. And I was very much, I mean, for me, one of the issues is that women are often portrayed as victims, and I think what came out strongly from some of the discussion today is that women are very much active agents of change, and we should really be empowering women to be able to contribute along with men, along with all parts of the community to the response. And one of the things I just wanted to flag, and I think Dalit, you mentioned it as well in Israel and the Middle East, in Australia and the Pacific region, we are being severely already impacted by climate change as well. We have bushfires, we have floods, we have islands that are disappearing. And so for us, it's very much about disaster prevention. And I think here, that's another area where women are underrepresented and often forgotten in the responses. And so it's very, very important, I think, that women are included in the decision-making, in disaster preparedness, in disaster response, to be able to address some of the specific needs that women and children have. And I just wanted to mention one other thing, and it kind of relates a little bit to what Sister was talking about before, but we've been working, the Australian government has been working quite closely with UN Women to develop a knowledge hub on disaster, on basically women's resilience to disaster, and to provide examples of what's been working and what hasn't. And I think one of the important things as well is to create these networks, because men have incredible networks, and women, I think, still are lacking in the networking and the resources that are available to them to be able to contribute. And often that's because they don't have time. They have, many other responsibilities and things. And so I think networking, and I think the Catholic Church and religious sisters have an incredible network around the world that they could use, including to distribute information, share experiences, and what works and what doesn't. So just a few comments from me. Thank you. Thanks once again.
Thank you. C'era un altro intervento? Henry.
Thank you, Nina. We know each other since a long time. Yes, I want to ask a kind of culturally provocative question, because as you know, our network is involved in sustainability also in terms of giving the role to this non-divisive issue of sustainability as a dialogue behind closed doors between Palestinians, Israelis, Jordanians, like the Diocese of Pitigliano is organizing a meeting on water next October, and my assistant coordinator Greta is going in 2 days in Amman for the Union for the Mediterranean meeting of the 42 countries on water. My question is about the role of the women, because we won a tender of the Italian Foreign Ministry about the resolution Women, Peace and Security of the United Nations Security Council, on an idea which is kind of bizarre, which is identity cuisine. And I want to focus on the term identity, because in terms of women empowerment, I think we can enhance the role of the women when they keep the memory of the collective identity, of their own groups. Because there are things from our grandmothers that are still relevant today. We want to go towards the future, but we want to keep something good about the balanced way of cooking, which is an anthropological concept, not just the material thing, in terms of impact on the nature, on the environment, and in strengthening our immunological system, which is so relevant nowadays.
Iman, I guess it's for you, Professor Smerilli.
Well, I will say something commenting all the various intervention. And first of all, what next? And now, well, there are various kind of levels of action we can do, and of course, some actions can be taken at certain levels, and who is able to make decisions should do it. But this cannot be an excuse for not doing what everyone can do. And for example, I was quoting before the Laudato Si Action platform. It's a platform launched by our Dicastery in cooperation with many entities like Laudato Si Movement and other groups. And it's a very simple idea, and which is 7 objectives, the Laudato Si objectives. And this is meant to simplify the 17 goals and to make something simple, 7, and maybe you can explain the meaningfulness of 7, but 7 goals, so ecological economy, listening to the cry of the poor, the cry of the earth. Everything is put in a way that it is an objectives, and we can do something to reach these objectives, but the 7 objectives should be reached all together because everything is interconnected. 7 objectives, 7 groups, families, religious organizations, but also the world of business or education, both schools and universities and so on, for 7 years. Because it's not something that you can do in just one shot or in 1 year. And what's the platform? It's a tool, it's a platform. You can enroll and you can exchange best practices, for example. You can fill in a questionnaire and you can see, okay, I'm a parish, I am a religious institute, I am a school, I am a university, and what can I do in order to accomplish these 7 objectives? And you will be put in relationship with others in the world that are doing the same. So we hopefully we can put together best practices, as we were saying, someone was saying, and we can learn one from another, and we can spread this ecological responsibility and awareness. And it's just a tool. It's not the only existing tool, but we think we can do something and we can offer. And yes, I think that we have something to learn also from the past to put to go towards the future. And I mean, this reminds me the attention Pope Francis pays in putting together elderly and young people. We know that the most active people for environment and for sustainability are the youth. But, and this is what we are doing with the Economy of Francesco group, Pope Francis had an intuition in 2019, and he called youth economists and entrepreneurs and change makers to go to Assisi. It was supposed to be in March 2020 to make a covenant to give, to change the economy and to give a soul for the future economy, to change what is the nowadays economy and give a soul for the to the future economy. We know that March 2020 was in the beginning of the pandemic, but this meeting is taking place hopefully next September. And but because of the pandemic, young people were working. They have been working for 3 years. A network of 3,000 economists, entrepreneurs, and change makers. But they are working with adults. They are working with seniors. And seniors are not the ones who are teaching. They are the ones who are listening and helping the youth to put their ideas in practice. They can listen and give advice and so on. And I think this is the way in which we can do something all together. It's a matter of network. It's a matter of being together, men, women, elderly and young, going to visit the past. And I think the example of the scriptures is something that can tell us how it is important to go to visit the past in order to build the future. And being here in a university in which the education is the core business, we can say, we know how it is important to be aware of what others did and have been doing until now, and on that basis to build the future.
Thank you. Fausta, you wanted to add something?
Sono assolutamente d'accordo che i livelli sono tanti e mi viene in mente che una responsabilità anche di noi donne può essere quella di non mascolinizzarsi, perché anche questo è un rischio in questi giochi di potere. Se è vero che non tutti gli uomini sono uomini di potere, è vero che non tutte le donne possono portare quel femminile di cui parlavamo, perché c'è il rischio a volte di adottare queste modalità maschili nel senso in cui dicevo prima, e veramente di mascolinizzarsi. Mi viene in mente un esempio, mi viene in mente la battaglia di Papa Benedetto contro il relativismo. Ecco, al di là di tutte le mode, al di là di tutto questo, chi meglio di una madre sa che non è vero che tutto è relativo, non è tutto uguale. Quello che il figlio mangia, chi frequenta, ecco, mi viene un esempio. Questo femminile e queste caratteristiche, o mi viene in mente un'espressione di Papa Francesco contro la corruzione, che ha speso una volta, ha detto Dio è più grande dei giochi sporchi degli uomini. Ecco, siccome è molto maschile nel senso in cui dicevo credere che noi in questi giochi sporchi dobbiamo farli più sporchi degli altri perché sennò non si sopravvive, ecco, può essere molto femminile e molto alternativa invece credere che no, non ci adeguiamo né alle logiche della corruzione né alle logiche dei giochi sporchi. Per cui come donne portare questo negli ambienti di lavoro, portare questo dove stiamo, anche questo all'interno della Chiesa o dove viviamo o nelle famiglie, questo può essere veramente un livello, diciamo, di intervento. È un'allerta anche per noi donne, perché la tentazione di mascolinizzarsi in certi ambienti dove magari per secoli non siamo state può essere forte.
Papa ha parlato di macismo in gonnella.
Molto meglio di
me. Ci avviamo alla conclusione? Sì. Allora ascoltiamo il progetto DAVCA, un ensemble che utilizza la musica ebraica come veicolo di un antico e quanto mai vivace patrimonio culturale, presentato con dei concerti che sono dei veri e propri percorsi musicali illustrati nella tradizione del nostro popolo. L'idea del progetto DAVCA è di sfruttare la musica per trasmettere anche verso le nuove generazioni l'importanza di sviluppare la propria identità nella riscoperta e nell'ospitalità di quelle altrui. Grazie.
Buonasera. Good evening. Thank you, everybody. Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this marvelous event. So important to listen all the important things that have been said tonight. But let's give some space to music also. What we will listen tonight is a part of our show, a show on Jewish music called Tikkun, reparation. With this show, we want to stimulate the attention on a more sustainable use of natural resources, showing that often in Jewish culture, central elements like man or Torah also are compared to elements of nature, because the role of these elements is crucial in the same way as man and Torah. The first song that we are going to listen is a very famous Israeli song called Alicha leKisaria, a walk along Caesarea. But it's more famous by the first two words, Eli, Eli. Now, today we are in a Christian environment, so these are the words that, according to the Gospels, Matthew, if I remember well, were said by a dying Jesus on the cross. So these are the first two words of this song that then becomes a real international hymn and prayer to the Lord, since He may preserve the sea, the sand, the noise of the waves, the thunder in the sky, and the prayer of man. Eli, Eli. Eli, Eli, שלא ייגמר לעולם, החום והים, ריש רוש של המים, ברק בשמיים, תפילת האדם, החום והים, ריש רוש של המים, ברק בשמיים, תפילת האדם. החול והים רשרוש של המים ברק בשמיים תפילת The following song is taken from the Proverbs. And it says, I gave you a good heritage, the Torah. Don't leave it, because it's like the tree of life. The Torah, the Bible. So don't leave it. The Torah is full of teachings. Actually, the word Bible is from Latin, the book, but the real word Torah means teaching. So this song is frequently used on Shabbat, the most important day of the Jewish calendar, the day of rest, when we bring the scrolls of Torah back into their place in the Aron HaKodesh. And I wanted to perform it here tonight, exactly because like a tree, the Torah can give us strength and wisdom to face the new challenges that the world is bringing us. כי לקח טוב נתתי לכם תורתי אל תעזובו עץ חיים היא למחזיקים בה ותומכיה מאושר דרכיה דרכי נועם בכל נתיבותיה שלום דרכיה דרכי נועם בכל נתיבותיה שלום. Ad the accordion, Desiree Fascelli. כי לקח טוב נתתי לכם תורתי אל
מחזיקים בה ותומכיה מאושר דרכיה דרכנוה בכל נתיבותיה שלום השיבני אדוני אליך ונשובה חדש ימינו כקדם.
Okay, we've been asked to perform just 3 songs for tonight, but it's an opportunity to welcome all of you to come to follow us on the social media and to see more of our music on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok now also. And if you like, to leave a like, if you enjoy, to leave a greeting. So, my name is Maurizio Di Veroli, and I am the director of Progetto d'Avca, a musical ensemble that since 2004 spreads knowledge of Jewish culture through its music. We perform Hebrew, Israeli songs, Ladino songs, Yiddish songs, from all the streamings of the Jewish culture, but we also like to show the interaction of Jewish culture with other cultures. Of all the cultures during the centuries welcome, more or less, our people in their countries. And we are a larger ensemble. We are not only we two. But tonight, not all of us could come. But we've been told that we have a wonderful audience that would love to participate with us, at least in the last song. So the last song is a medley. We called it Eco Medley. The first song is taken from Psalms number 1, where man is compared to a tree that gives good fruits in the right moment. The second song is also from the Psalms, from Psalm 92, that we use it to welcome Shabbat. And the third song is instead from the prophets, from Isaiah. And since majority of our songs talk of trees, because tree is a very common element, as it said in the Bible, in Devarim, Sefer Devarim, Deuteronomy, that reminds men. So we wanted to talk also about water. So the third song will talk about the importance of drawing water with joy, because joy is a very important element in Jewish culture. Through joy, we can get close to the Lord, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we can make His will being happy. That's probably the highest way to serve the Lord. Eco Medley.
אשרי האיש אשר לא הלך פצעת רשעים ובדרך חטאים לא אמר ובמושב לצים לא ישב כי בתורת אדוני חפצו ובתורתו יגן יומם ולילה והיה כעץ שתול על פלגי מים אשר פריו ייתן ביתו ועלהו לא ייבוא והיה כעץ שתול על פלגי מים אשר פריו ייתן ביתו ועלהו לא ייבוא היה וכל אשר יעשה יצליח אשר יעשה יצליח וכל אשר יעשה יצליח אשר יעשה יצליח והיה קץ שתול על פלגי מים אשר פריו ייתן ביתו ועלהו לא ייבור והיה קץ שתול על פלגי מים אשר פריו ייתן ביתו ועלהו לא ייבור וכל אשר יעשה יצליח אשר יעשה יצליח וכל אשר יעשה יצליח אשר יעשה יצליח צדיק אתה יפרח יפרח צדיק אתה יפרח צדיק אתה יפרח יפרח צדיק אתה יפרח כארז בלבנון יזכה 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 così come una palma il giusto rifiorirà così come una palma il giusto rifiorirà come il cedro del Libano come il cedro del Libano come il cedro del Libano crescerà come il cedro del Libano come il cedro del Libano come il cedro del Libano crescerà fanne una vuoto vai la prossima la facciamo in giapponese. Ijin wasaka eru natsume yasino yo Ijin wasaka eru natsume yasino yo Maru de Lebanon sugi Takaku no biru sugi no yo Maru de Lebanon sugi Takaku no biru sugi no yo Tzaddik tamari frach yifrach Tzaddik tamari frach Tzaddik tamari frach yifrach Tzaddik tamari frach Keres balbano nizge Keres balbano nizge Keres balbano nizge izge Keres balbano nizge Keres balbano nizge Keres balbano nizge izge Shaftem mayim besasson mimayane a Yeshua. Shaftem mayim besasson mimayane a Yeshua. Mayim, 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 oh mayim besasson. Mayim, 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 oh mayim besasson. Hey, 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 hey. Shaftem mayim, shaftem mayim, shaftem mayim besasson. Shaftem mayim, shaftem mayim, shaftem mayim besasson. Shaftem mayim besasson, mimayane a Yeshua. Shaftem mayim besasson, mimayane a Yeshua. Mayim, 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 oh mayim besasson. Mayim, 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 oh mayim besasson. Hey, 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 hey. Shaftem mayim, shaftem mayim, shaftem mayim besasson. Shaftem mayim, shaftem mayim, shaftem mayim besasson.
Okay, for tonight, we arrived at the end. I want to thank so much the Israeli embassy at the Holy See and the ambassador and all the staff for inviting us here tonight. And I want to thank you, all the relators and every single of you for being here at this amazing afternoon together. As we said, we hope to see you soon at our shows or on the media, on the social media. You can search for Progetto Davka. You will find also our logo and our infos on the leaflet that you receive at the entrance. Thanks again so much to everybody, and good evening.
Mentre ringraziamo veramente tutti di questo bellissimo e ricchissimo pomeriggio, chiediamo ai partecipanti di uscire dalle porte laterali e poi per restituire le cuffie si rientra dalla portineria. Invece i signori ambasciatori e le autorità escono dal centro. Grazie.